Cam Roigard looks like he could be back. How does that change the All Blacks attack? How does that change the way that they can be effective both close to the ruck and far away from the ruck?
Geez, well, what it does do defensively, I think for the Australians, you've got to keep him as he's a threat. Whether it's a rock action leader you saw against Counties Monaco when he was able to score his try when he first came on, it's just a different question that poses you defensively. And it's no disrespect, obviously, Finlay that was there for the last couple of Test matches, and unfortunately, Noah Hotham got injured. But you've got to be able to be on. And so the only way that Cam's able to do that is if our forward pack is able to win the physicality. And so I think probably against the South Africans, they're the toughest in terms of being able to try to win that on an everyday basis. But I think the ability to be able to do that, it's going to get teams to tighten up and condense more so the first three forwards either side of the ruck. And then in terms, if that's the case, they're really tight, then you're able to go a little bit wider, whether it's the night, hitting the 9 or being able to get to a Bowden Barrett a little bit wider. It just condenses them if we're able to win and give him a good go forward ball as well. So, yeah, I think Cam's a massive for us in terms of being able to, get our mojo back. But I think it's just he's a different type of halfback. I've touched on it. I think for the next 12 months, he's going to be arguably one of the best halfbacks in the world. So if the forward pack can get in that go forward ball, then it's going to open not only for him, but the players in and around him with the forward pod, and then being able to get a little bit wider. Hopefully seeing now our outside backs being able to be the recipient of that tight defensive defence from the Australians.
Players like him, especially around the breakdown for forwards, you'll focus on them, which means your head is sometimes not on a swivel. You're sort of looking at Cam, looking at there, and then, taking off. And by that time, as you look back worried about him, your player might have moved. And then what happens with that is either it creates a hole somewhere else, but more importantly, if they get some width on the pass, the All Blacks, you can cut off 6 or 7 defenders and trap them with a good hard out carry from that forward pod of the All Blacks, and then that quick ball. If we can get that quick ball and go, then you can skin teams on the outside. And I think that's what is really powerful in terms of getting our phase play attack going when Cam's there.
I think the South Africans, look, they were able to bring a high line speed pressure. Their defense is to put that skill set under pressure. But if we were able to be able to get over the advantage line with our carriers off Cam, or be able to get a tight carry off our 10, with this defensive, passiveness that the Australians do have, we'll be able to swing. And with what we kind of saw probably in that French series, that when we got things nice and tight, our forwards were able to win that first contact area, first or 2 rucks. We would then be able to swing and been able to, get the animation of down lines out the back and guys roving in and around a 10 or a 12. So I just think, hate to harp on the point, but Jip really touched on it in terms of the physicality. And I think if that forward pack can get good go forward ball, the opportunities that we are going to see is going to be able to see a passive Australian defence and not a high line speed pressure with what we probably saw against the South Africans.
I've put a couple of clips together here that I think the switch play is on in the attacking half of the All Blacks, potentially further out. But if I use the first test against the Springboks as the first example, is they're basically in the 22 and the South African players fold, and you can see the Wallabies, they're trying to get around that corner. They know that that's the South African style. Now, if they don't fold hard, South Africa can just keep going. So if the All Blacks play this theory and they don't, I suppose, match them like we saw against the Springboks, you can just keep going and you'll eventually get to the try line. But what they did is they came around, and then the most important bit was they switched back with a pick and go, which normally you'd say don't pick and go against the grain. But what it did, because they folded hard, Peter Steff made a little pick and go, made a little chink, and was a little bit isolated time, which rushed in 2 Wallaby defenders, and then quick ball. And the critical thing, I keep going like that, quick ball, because I've seen this opportunity a lot against the Wallabies. If you can inject yourself into the line, like a Damian McKenzie. In this clip, you can see Boks just pounces, runs deep into the defensive line, draws out Skelton, and then the beautiful touches of Fussy, he just holds his feet. So sometimes when someone injects into the D-line, you sort of chase in with them, but they just orchestrated. They knew that on the switch play, the Wallabies would be passive defensively, and because he punched into that line, it caused Will Skelton to jam. They didn't come with him. Fussy quick hands and a try in the corner. Now, it presents itself again, I think, as an opportunity from a penalty. If in the second test, if we go to a maul, now I think early in the game, if we can go to a maul and do a maul, Okay, so that's the first, in terms of, I suppose, the chess game, is do a couple of more so that you actually draw in their defence, draw in the Wallabies defenders, because if you don't go to a maul and you go to a bunter play first, they actually spread quite well and it's hard to get into that channel. But in this example, they do a bunter play, but they'd mauled a couple of times for context, and then Malcolm Marx comes around and they basically get to the middle of the field, and the rest of the forwards are almost holding the Australians in that maul. And then there's an ejection down, another switch play straight away. Nothing going around the corner. Players go around the corner to force part of the Wallabies defence around, and then they come on this down line with the front row and a lock. And I think it's something that, once they get them behind, it's then again, ball up, ball up, ball up. Like Sia Khaleesi scored a try as well with the pick and go. So just keep going through the middle. Now this comes into Cam Roigard. It just fits his game. He will scoop up and go. Even a Cortez Ratama, what we saw of him before he got injured. So I just think, as you can see, I've got a bit of energy about it because I think it's going to feed a lot of confidence into this All Black attack, and that's what excites me. But also, hopefully, it gives us more opportunities in the 22 because we can really expose this Wallabies defence in these methods of switching.
Oh, now, let's go into the appendix here. We've got bunter play.
Yes. So a bunter play is a fake maul, and they sometimes pop it to the hooker wrapping round, or the 7 pops out and passes.
Right, folding.
Folding is just going around the corner, either defensively or on attack, and it's just literally called folding around the corner. I just think there's such an opportunity to get our mojo back around playing the chess game this week, both on attack and D.
Taranaki played some good chess.
Yes. So I think there's a couple of moves that we can steal from that magical coaching group of Neil Barnes, Gerard Hoyata and Bradley Cooper. And I can say it's from the coaches because I spoke to Josh Jacob after the game and he credited the coaches. So the first one is a switch play. They use the hooker folding. So Bradley Slater folds, and then Josh Jacobs sort of holds, which just checks that Hawke's Bay defence enough. There's also a great clean out. I think it's Peretti. He cleans deep and almost, again, blocking defenders like the South Africans held the Aussies in, and then which drew out the panic once Slater gets the ball. But Slater didn't engage, so they're rushing out to try and slow him, but he just holds his feet, inside ball to Josh Jacob, try time. And then they did it again late, which we've seen a lot, and I remember we used it for the under-20s against, and as this sort of stacked up, you've got all the back stacked up here, and they just sort of, on the switch, they fold and join the forwards, and it creates a lot of deception. Now, it's not uncommon, but just the execution of it, because the Wallabies fold so quickly, if the All Blacks can hit that midfield and come back with a swing attack with Damian McKenzie, Will Jordan, Beauden Barrett, whew, I think my mate wants to critique my analysis.
What you got?
No. I think that's a perfect way of seeing it as clip strip, because if you do think in terms of like the switch play, defensively, sometimes if you're doing it first or 2 phases, the number 9 ends up being on the edge. So, depending on in terms of like a defender, it's probably not I wouldn't say it's not your better defender, but obviously it's someone you can, obviously, if it's a loose water on the edge or anybody else that's got a bit of footwork, it's a little bit easier to be able to defend on a 9. But then also the first 2 phases, you're passive. Because when you go back down that short side, your first movement probably isn't going up to be able to go big, to be able to have big line speed. And if you are over folding, you tend to be able to be short on that short side. So if you are swinging, with probably the example there, hopefully you do clip Ross, but the first movement is them going backwards because you've got so many players that are coming into that space late. You're not able to identify who's running where, the down line, or how many players to be able to counter if that ball is very, very quick. So it's definitely one play, which probably we saw actually with the All Blacks strip in terms of against Argentina. Beauden Barrett would come back on kind of a switch play, but they were actually being able to put the ball in behind. So obviously you can use the kick space if it's there, but I think being able to use that switch play, the first movements, I guess, of that defensive side on the short side is actually quite passive. So yeah, definitely something that I think is something to look into.
You mentioned kick play there. It's another thing that I've looked at, Brynner, this week is there's two examples that I put together in that second test of South Africa. There's a little dink over the top, and then there's obviously an attempt to exit kick. I think it was by Beauden Barrett. But the main thing is there's so much space on the edge now. Teams are almost giving the All Blacks that, and I think, and this goes against my DNA of exiting, but I think it should suit the All Blacks this week, is put it through the hands and almost kick from the edge. I'm not saying throw the kitchen sink coming out of your 22, but I think we should chance our arm and try and get a bend on the edge. We can always come back to the 15 and box kick from there, or we can get to the edge and we can kick down the field, especially if Will Jordan's playing on that right flank. It creates so many opportunities for a chip and chase, even a long, sort of grubber that could be a potential 50-22, rather than, I suppose, what we've shown picture-wise. Defence is sort of just getting tight, looking to load up on the forwards and then pressure the kick. I think if they do that, then I'd really love to see the All Blacks just spread it wide and really play to those edges, and even just play. Really run it out. If they get over that gain line, come with some downlines and build that phase and that up tempo. I just think the more up tempo, because the Wallabies are so wanting to play fast and really wanting to chance their arm, I think we can match that and almost better it with the players that we've got.
We've had some good questions come through this week. And some of my favourite questions are always the most obvious ones. And sometimes it's just taking it right back to a complicated game and simplifying it so everyone can understand. This came through from Isaac October. What is our game plan / strategy, referring to the All Blacks? What is our defensive style? Brynner, what is the All Blacks game plan right now?
Depending on who they're playing. Like, I think if you look at that French series, we were able to win the physicality battle, and when we were able to do that, our backs are swinging and being able to score tries when we got really nice and tight. And we talked about it at length with how they were able to score tries on the edge. So I think that's probably one part of, if we do get that physicality right, we have the ability to be able to swing together, choose the right option. And if you look at that first half, even though we lost against South Africa, you look at the skill set and I guess the ability for us to be able to use the ball under pressure, to get the ball, the depth, the adjustment of being able to know that line speed's coming, to get that ball away. We were very good in that first half and probably should have scored a couple more points in terms of the chances that we did have. So I think that our attack is there. It's probably just in that South African game and the execution, and I guess the bombardment that we felt in the second half probably overshadowed with how well we played in that first half. And then I think also, depending on what the conditions are like and if it is condensed, we do have to be able to go to the pressure game. So I think with our kicking game and being able to build, being able to put them under pressure and kind of in a pressure cycle of what we saw in that first test match against South Africa. So I just think with the difference with what I see from South Africa is that they're very, very good at being able to play the condensed style and being able to go to the contested game, the high defensive pressure. But even though they lost against us in that first test match, they've got that. But the second test match, with the ability to be able to play with ball in hand, I think they just did a little bit better in that second half. But to answer your question, I think we've got two ways that we do play, but I think ideally that running rugby and in that French series have been able to win the physicality collision area, and then being able to use our backs and that kind of swinging motion that Jip kind of has touched on with what we saw with Taranaki. It's probably our DNA of being able to see over the way how we play.
I think it's interesting what you say, Brennan, and I think it's worth explaining what you mean by pressure cycles, because in terms of what I suppose viewers should look for and what is a pressure cycle?
When you've got a very, very good defence, if you look at probably the South Africans, the way that they're able to win the collision area, we're probably not able to get that good gain line percentage of what we probably do against other teams. It's been able to say, how are we able to put this team under pressure without using the ball? And I know sometimes people might see it as a little bit negative, but setting up for a box kick or a contested war of 10 to be able to nail the kick, and I guess with the aerial battle and being able to not have escorts game, to get a tap back and being able to dive on the ball and then being able to have, I guess, a little bit of chaos for 30 seconds off that, being able to use the ball, shift the ball, being able to get it to our X-Factor players, or being able to, I guess, to get the footwork of a Roigard, Will Jordan with space in there, with space around it, is probably a good example of that. And I think also as well, 50-22s, being able to kick the ball nice and long, winning a kick battle, being able to go, we're not going to chance our arm here because we're not in the position where we want to be in the attacking side. So we're kicking down the middle of the field. It's bouncing one or two times. You've got a Roigard or a Beauden Barrett chasing the ball to be able to put a charge down. Then that ball goes out and it's 30 metres out from their line. So those are kind of the pressure cycles without the ball that I've kind of touched on, because I think against the Australians, I feel that there are going to be a lot more opportunities to play on top of them because of the way that they do defend. And if we do win that physicality battle, I think we are going to be able to pull trigger and be able to get a lot more opportunities, what we found probably against South Africa. But still having that ability that if we aren't getting that right and we're making mistakes, or for whatever reason our execution with our ball in hand isn't working, going back to those pressure cycles of being able to make it a little bit more easy for us and back our defense is probably a way that I'd explain the pressure cycle.